Welcome to the podcast summary of Mihail Kogălniceanu. Today's episode is about one of those figures who seems to be everywhere once you start looking. Mihail Kogălniceanu, a historian, journalist, reformer, prime minister, foreign minister, and one of the key architects of modern Romania. His story pulls together nation-building, union, peasant reform, independence, and a very uncomfortable set of contradictions around liberalism and exclusion. He helped build the modern state, and he also shows how messy that project could be. Kogălniceanu started with an argument about history and identity. In an 1843 inaugural lecture, he said his country included every place where Romanian was spoken: Moldavia, Wallachia, Transylvania, and other Romanian-inhabited regions. That mattered because it shifted the frame from separate principalities to a broader national community. He'd studied in Berlin under Leopold von Ranke, and he absorbed a lot from German nationalism, especially the idea that laws and institutions should fit a nation's historical character instead of being copied in the abstract. He also helped popularize the modern names Romanian and Romania, replacing narrower Moldavian and Wallachian labels with a more unified national vocabulary. And he didn't do this only in speeches. Through journals like Dacia Literară and Staua Dunării, through editions of historical chronicles, and through literary criticism, he pushed for a culture grounded in folklore, spoken language, and local historical sources instead of imitation and excessive Francization. So even before he was shaping the state, he was trying to shape the story. The state would tell about itself. He wasn't just a romantic nationalist waving at the past. He turned that national idea into a political program. In his 1848 manifesto, Dorintele Partidei Naționale din Moldova, he called for civil liberties, separation of powers, an end to corvées, abolition of privilege, and union between Moldavia and Wallachia. That's a pretty striking jump from patriotic feeling to a draft outline for constitutional government. He helped abolish boyar privileges, supported representative government and autonomy, and became a major strategist of the unionist movement. When Alexandru Koza was elected to both the Moldavian and Wallachian thrones in 1859, creating the foundation of modern Romania, Kogălniceanu was one of the people who made that outcome possible. What's interesting is that he paired liberal ideas with a real preference for strong monarchical rule. He used the formula, democratic principles, as part of a monarchic government. And over time, he grew wary of revolution itself, warning that civilization stops when revolutions begin. So even early on, you can see the tension. Reform, yes, but orderly reform, and if necessary, push through from above. Some of his most consequential work was in emancipation and land reform. He helped draft the 1855 law abolishing privately owned Roma slavery in Moldavia, finishing a process that had already freed state-owned and church-owned Roma. One of the emotional shocks behind that law was the case of Dinkum, an educated Roma cook who killed himself and his wife after learning he would not be freed. Later, as Koza's prime minister and interior minister, Kogălniceanu drove the secularization of Orthodox monastery estates in 1863. That pulled a huge amount of land into state hands, roughly a third of Moldavia's arable land and a fourth of Wallachia's, making redistribution possible. His land reform then ended corvées and assigned plots based on what peasant families could work. About 7.5 hectares for families with 4 or more oxen, 6 hectares for those with 2, and 3 hectares for laborers without oxen. The boyar-dominated parliament rejected the project, and Koza answered with the May 1864 coup to impose it. This is one of those moments where the reform is undeniably major, and the method is also undeniably coercive. Kogălniceanu defended the reform not only against conservatives, but even against Koza. When the ruler tried to delay implementation, he threatened to resign until the law was actually applied in 1865. In the short term, the change was socially transformative. In the long term, it was weaker than it looked. Population growth, inheritance, splitting plots into smaller and smaller pieces, peasant debt, estate leasing, and corruption all eroded the gains and helped set the stage for the Peasants' Revolt of 1907. So this wasn't a fake reform. It was a real one with real impact. It just wasn't enough to solve the agrarian problem for good, which is a very familiar kind of modern state story. His partnership with Kuzma also produced a broader wave of institutional change. The Napoleonic Code, public education, identity papers, a national police force, and state monopolies. That's a sweeping modernization program, and it gives you the sense of a state being built almost in fast forward. But the alliance eventually cracked. Kuzma's authoritarian style became harder to ignore, and court scandals didn't exactly improve the atmosphere. Kogălniceanu's own career ended up illustrating a recurring tension in Romanian liberalism. He supported democracy, civil liberties, and peasant emancipation. But he also accepted constitutional shortcuts and coercive state action when elected elites blocked reform. He wanted liberal outcomes, but he was often willing to use decidedly illiberal methods to get there. That contradiction sits right at the center of his politics. Later, as foreign minister, Kogălniceanu helped steer Romania out from under Ottoman suzerainty and into the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 to 1878. He persuaded Carol to accept military cooperation with Russia, even though Russia initially treated Romania less like a full partner and more like a protected dependency. Helpful allies can still be stressful roommates. On May 9, 1877, his parliamentary speech formally proclaimed Romania's independence. That decision was strategically necessary, but it came with risks. There were secret negotiations with Russia, and after the war, Romania was exposed to Russian pressure. At the Congress of Berlin, Kogălniceanu opposed Russia's demand to trade northern Dobruja for southern Bessarabia. Romania still lost southern Bessarabia and received northern Dobruja instead. He then defended Dobruja as historically Romanian and organized its administration and colonization, pursuing what was effectively an assimilationist kind of colonial rule. Berlin also required Romania to promise emancipation for non-Christian residents. Here the limits of his liberalism came through clearly, because he resisted the requirement for Jewish emancipation. So even at the moment of national independence, the question of who fully belonged inside the nation was still being fenced off and fought over. This is what makes Kogălniceanu hard to file neatly under hero or villain and call it a day. He was celebrated as a founder of modern Romanian culture and as a liberator of peasants in Roma. He also used anti-Semitic language and, while serving as interior minister, supported rural expulsions of Jewish residents. At the same time, his anti-Semitism wasn't completely consistent. He opposed the expulsion of the Jewish scholar Moses Gaster, later supported citizenship for Constantin Dobrogeanu Ghirea, and reportedly backed naturalization for Lazar Șanianu, despite opposition inside his own party. That inconsistency doesn't erase the exclusionary politics, but it does show that his nationalism didn't operate in one simple straight line. Later fascist movements cited both his peasant politics and his restrictions on Jews as precedents. Communist-era propaganda, meanwhile, reclaimed him as a progressive historical figure. So his legacy ended up being claimed from very different directions, because it genuinely contains both emancipatory reform and exclusionary nationalism. That's not a glitch in the story. It is the story. Kogălniceanu helped give modern Romania its language, institutions, reforms, and international footing, and he also left behind the kind of contradictions that keep historians busy for generations. He's a reminder that state building can be ambitious, transformative, and morally compromised all at once, which is not the cleanest ending, but it is an honest one. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.